Happy Wednesday. Thanks for joining our weekly team meeting for our offices. Good to have today as a guest speaker in a few minutes over here, Jeff Kahn, our office attorney. You know, one great thing that we learned, Jeff, with attorneys the past few months is the agents actually very excited to wait for you guys to speak and share some insight, you know, so, between you and the brokers. So, so let's go ahead and start our meeting. Stephanie, I can't get this thing move away from the screen. Hold on for a second.
I don't know what it says under there. It says.
Go for it.
Oh, there we go. It is literally true that you can succeed best and quickest by helping others to succeed, by Napoleon Hill.
Yeah, so go ahead and digest that for a minute. And what does it mean to you when you read it on the screen?
Yeah, it's really the more that you give, the more that you give and serve other people, the more that that you succeed and that you receive. And it's just really just that that circle of life, right, type thing, where the more that you help other people, the more that people help you, and the more that everybody succeeds together. It's really just joining arms, and everyone succeeds together. So it's a dynamic dynamic thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we all in the business of serving others. So if you have that mindset and attitude, then usually it's always great to win-win. So thanks for sharing, Stephanie.
You're welcome.
And go ahead and give a shout out to Alison Silverman. Stephanie, go ahead. It's one of our Calabasas agents.
Yeah, so Allison, a big shout out to you. Congratulations on capping. You're on a roll. You're absolutely on fire, and it's great to be in business with you. So continue on this fascinating journey that you have. Congratulations.
Yeah, congrats, Alison. Good job. And yeah, she's definitely on a mission this year. So watch out and keep it up. Great job. Thank you. And now to our main speaker of the today's meeting, Jeff Kahn, our office attorney. Jeff, good to have you. Thanks for joining the meeting.
Thanks, Meny. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear and see you. And once again, great Zoom background. So all yours.
Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to support all of you today so that you can support me and then we could all be successful. So I hope you're all safe and healthy. This morning, we're going to cover some forms that came out in June, the CAR forms that came out in June, do a little bit of discussion about those forms, both new and revised. Then we're going to cover some COVID information, both forms and just information regarding COVIDs. We're going to talk about open houses. We're going to talk about masks. We're going to talk about eviction moratorium, and we're going to do it all in a half hour. So we're going to start out with the forms that came out in June for CAR, which are non-COVID forms. The first one is the square footage and lot size disclosure and advisory. And that form, I don't know, Meny, are you requiring that form, do you know, in your office, the square footage and lot size addendum, or is that just an optional form right now?
It's optional, Jeff.
Okay.
If there is a discrepancy, if they know of a discrepancy, then either that form or we have our own, which you
Right.
helped put together.
Absolutely, I totally agree with Rich there. So the form is not mandatory, but anytime you're aware of a discrepancy between the square footage that you are putting in the MLS or in marketing material and the public record, you need to either use this form or the Keller-Williams form, because that you have to disclose the discrepancy. That's like one of the biggest lawsuits that's around now. The most lawsuits we have are square footage. And so if you know there's a discrepancy, you've got to disclose that. So that's pretty simple. The form is pretty simple to fill out. But if you use the form, it is important to make sure that the numbers you're putting in there are accurate for the numbers you're finding. So the other thing that you can do wrong here is use the form and use it improperly and put in wrong numbers, because putting in wrong numbers is worse than not using the form at all. So if you're using the form and there's a discrepancy, make sure you're using the proper numbers. The second form, and I'll ask Rich also, the second new form that came out is the property visit and open house advisory form. Rich, is that also an optional form? Are you mandating
Yes.
that, or?
No, it's an optional form.
Okay, so that form, the property visit and open house advisory, it's kind of a bad title, because the open house part, you're really not allowed to do open houses now, but this form was in the works before coronavirus ever hit. And the purpose of this form is to inform buyers that a couple of things. The first thing is that there is recording devices in a lot of people's homes, and you shouldn't be in the house with your buyer as a buyer's agent talking about what you're going to offer. There's kind of a famous case up north where the agent and the buyer discussed what they would offer, but the buyer said they would go higher, and the seller heard the whole thing. So that's not going to be too good for purposes of negotiating. The second part of that is just, besides recording, is just being safe, that it's not your house. There may be steps that you're not familiar with. They may ask you to wear booties, whatever it is, you got to be careful you don't fall down or whatever. So that form can be used with a buyer. It's not only for open houses. That's why the title isn't really good. It's for any showing. So really, it should have been called property visit, period, without open house, but it's in there. Those are the two new forms. As far as the revised forms, there's 11 or 12 revised forms, but the only one that I'm going to cover today is the TDS. The transfer disclosure statement was revised, and it's an important revision because the form used to have two boxes in section 1. Section 1 is the area that says whether there's a substituted disclosure by the seller. And if that's left blank, some plaintiff's attorneys figured out that if you leave it blank, it's not a fully completed form. And if the form isn't fully completed, then the rescission period hasn't started. And that's not a good thing. So CAR changed the form to include a third box. And the third box is there are no substitute disclosures. So almost all of the time, the seller should be filling out the third box and checking that, saying there's no substitute disclosure, because that's generally going to be the case. And once you've checked that box, you've completed that section. Now, for those of you, I think more and more people are starting to use the product Glide. And if you're using Glide, it's a great program for disclosure. It also won't let the seller finish the form without checking one of those boxes. So it really reminds the seller they have to check a box. Now, if you had a form like, let's say, an asbestos disclosure, I think an asbestos disclosure, if you had it, an asbestos report would qualify as a substitute disclosure for the issue of asbestos. But short of that, those kind of reports, 99% of the time, you're just going to have the seller check the box that says that there's no substitute disclosure. And again, the reason for that is if you don't check the box, they're going to argue that you don't have a fully completed TDS, and therefore the rescission period hasn't run. So those are the only things I'm really going to cover from the June updates. And Rich or Meny or Stephanie, if you see any questions, just holler and let me know. I'm going to switch over now to some COVID stuff. And on the COVID front,
Jeff, I'm going to stop you. There was a question. What do we do if we don't know the actual square footage yet? We know it's bigger than public records.
Well, if you know it's bigger than public records, you really can't be putting a number in. I mean, you can't guess at the number. So all you could do is in the agent remarks, you could put that that the seller believes that the square footage is larger than, but the buyer should do their own independent investigation. So you need to be careful. You can't guess at a number, because if the number's wrong, you got a problem. Okay.
And also in regards to the TDS additional reports, what about pest control or an electric report, or
Well, pest control, I mean, you could, there's no magic to this substitute disclosure. So if you have a pest control report that you're going to give, you could give it as a substitute disclosure, and it would be a substitute disclosure for that issue of termites, because the seller wouldn't know about termites without doing a pest control report. So yeah, that could be considered a substitute disclosure. And your other one was electrical report. If you had an electrical report, it's not really a substitute disclosure for the whole house or anything. It's just a report about a specific thing, I would assume. So you could give it, you would give it because you're required to give your reports, but I'm not sure it would really qualify as substitute disclosure. But to be honest, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. As long as you check a box there, whether it be no disclosure or some other disclosure, you're completing the form. So it's not really critical what you determine to be an actual substitute disclosure as opposed to not. It's just important you complete the form. Okay. I think you muted yourself there, Rich, but that's okay. So we're going to move along to some COVID stuff now, since that's our favorite topic of the day. And I wanted to mention that there's a really good industry guideline for showing Q&A that CAR has. And if you go to car.org and you go to the risk management and go to COVID legal, you'll see an industry guideline for showings, and it's got like a 9 or 10 step process. And it tells you pretty much everything you need to know about showing property now. And of course it's statewide, so it doesn't cover the local ordinances, but it's pretty all inclusive. It's talking about having to post the form on the door and an MLS and using the PED, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to mention one form that changed recently, and that's the BPPP form. That's the best practices form, which is your mandatory office office form for your policy. And there were 2 changes made to that form that I wanted to cover. And the first change has to do with open houses. I'm sure you're all aware by now that a traditional open house is not allowed, both statewide and locally. But the BPPP was clarified based on Cal OSHA. And if you look at, you don't have to do it now, but if you look at your BPP form, paragraph 2 and 3 on the first page have been changed. And paragraph 2 says that there are no traditional open houses allowed. And it also states that if you're using an open house sign, first of all, CAR recommends, and I recommend, you don't use an open house sign, because it's, to me, it's deceptive to the public. You're not really holding an open house. But you are actually allowed to use an open house sign only if you put a rider on the sign that says it's by appointment only, and or digital signature required to enter the house. So you can use a open house sign if you want to. I'm saying don't. I'm sure that your office doesn't really want you to use it, but if you use it, you have to use a rider saying by appointment only. If you don't do that, you are subject to discipline by the local association of realtors. If you do put by appointment only, I think you know now that if you're holding, or if you're, what you can do is you can say that appointments, we will take showings between 10 and 2 o'clock on Sunday, but you have to call for an appointment. That's not really an open house, that's calling for an appointment. And then you can set up your appointments, but you got to follow all the rules. The property's got to be cleaned before and after, you got to practice social distancing, you've got to have people wearing masks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can pull that off on a Sunday and show the property 5 times by appointment, that's fine. But it's not really an open house because the appointments need to be made ahead of time, and you have to follow all the procedures for a showing. The
Jeff,
second change, yeah, go ahead.
In regards to the rider, there's a question, could it say virtual open house with a Zoom address on it? That would qualify as an appropriate rider, correct?
Oh, sure. If it's a virtual open house only, sure. And if people aren't going in the property, that would be fine. I think that would be fine because a virtual open house means nobody's entering the property. The second change on the BPP was on page 2, and it has to do with masks. And I'm going to read this to you and you can figure out what it says, but here's what it says. It says, all visitors must wear face coverings. For individuals with disabilities who cannot wear a face covering or face shield, the showing agent will engage in an interactive process with the individual to discuss any available reasonable accommodations. Okay, so I don't know what that means, but bottom line is everybody's supposed to wear a mask. If somebody comes there and says, I can't wear a mask because I have asthma or whatever, according to this BPPP now, and according to the Cal OSHA, you're supposed to enter an interactive discussion with this person about alternatives. I don't know what an alternative would be because the seller is going to have to allow the showing. So if you get somebody who says, I won't wear a mask because I can't, you're going to have to go, and if you're the showing agent, you're going to have to contact the listing agent. The listing agent's going to have to contact the seller. The seller's going to have to say, okay, you can let the person in without a mask. And you're going to have some kind of a paper trail in writing where the seller said to do that, because otherwise you're potentially going to get blamed for letting somebody in the house without a mask. Now, I have asthma. I had asthma when I was a kid. I don't really have it bad now, but I wear a mask all the time. I mean, I'm not wearing it right now, but I mean, I can wear a mask and I don't have a problem. So I'm thinking that, and I don't mean anything negative towards the people that really can't wear a mask, but I suggest to you that there are a whole lot of people that say they can't wear a mask that can. So I think you have to have that discussion. And also, it mentions face shields in here, and I would think, and I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but to me, I would think that if you can't wear a mask, seems to me you probably would be able to wear a face shield, even if you had some kind of asthma or whatever. I mean, a face shield doesn't really go over your mouth directly. So anyway, that's what it says now. You have to have a discussion and go from there. As far as the PED form, there were a couple of minor changes on the PED form, but you all know by now that the PED form needs to be signed by everybody entering the property. It's supposed to be signed digitally, not, you're supposed to use less and less paper because paper can, transfer the coronavirus, I guess. So everything's supposed to be done digitally if at all possible. The PED-V form is to be signed by anybody entering the property. The PED-S form is to be signed by the occupant. The question has come up, and I know Rich is on the Friday calls with CAR. The question has come up about when the PED has to be signed. What if it's signed the day before or whatever? CAR's position has changed and waffled a little bit on that, but right now their position seems to be, and I would say my position is similar, that you don't absolutely positively have to have the PED signed the date that you're showing the property. For instance, let's say you're showing the property at 9 a.m. this morning. If you got the PED signed last night, or within 24 hours, I would say that should be sufficient. The only change in that rule is you have to make sure that there's no change in the buyer's condition, because the buyer is stating the PED that they don't have a fever, that they don't have any signs of the coronavirus, et cetera, and if something changed between the time they sign the form and they go into the property, of course, that's going to have to be disclosed, and you're going to need a new PED form. But short of that, I think you can probably go with like the 24-hour rule, that if you have it within 24 hours, you should be able to use the same PED. If you're doing it 4 or 5 days later, then you need a new PED for that. So that kind of takes care of that form. That is, of course, a mandatory form. The posted rules of entry, the PRE form, I think everybody knows now, that's the 2-page form. One of them has the pictures on it, and the other one just has like an explanation. That has to be put on the front door, and it has to be put in the MLS. It only needs to be on the front door when a property is being shown. It doesn't need to be there all the time. That is all you need. You don't have to put the BPPP on. You don't need anything else other than the posted rules of entry for the MLS and for the front door. And then, of course, there's still the CVA, which is the coronavirus addendum, which is an optional form. The others are mandatory. The CVA and the NUCC, which is notice of unforeseen circumstances, those are all optional forms. And when we say optional, it's up to the buyer and the seller to decide whether to use those forms. Your job as an agent, as a buyer's agent, is to make the buyer aware of the existence of the form. That's important, because if you don't do it, they can come back later and say, why didn't you tell me there was such a form? So your job is to make them aware of it. Then it's up to them whether they want to incorporate it into an offer or not. And if they incorporate it into an offer, it's up to the seller to say yes or no to that. So that's subject to negotiation. It's not mandatory, but really what is mandatory in that is that you present that form to the buyer at the time you're writing an offer so they can make a decision whether to use it. So I would say mandatory to give it and explain it to the buyer up front, not mandatory to use it. Because again, if you don't explain that form to the buyer up front, and then later on they find out that it was a form you didn't tell them about, they're going to claim potentially that you breached your fiduciary duty. So that's those forms.
Jeff,
Rich, go ahead.
Going back to the mask, somebody who refuses to wear a mask, there's a question that can a listing agent refuse entry to a person who refuses to wear a mask?
Well, I think the answer to that is that the listing agent can't really refuse anything. It's not the listing agent's job. It's up to the seller. So I don't think a listing agent should be making any decisions on who can enter the property unless they already have something signed by the seller saying, do not let, if the listing agent has something signed by the seller saying, do not let anybody enter the property without a mask, then you can enforce it. Otherwise, I think it's up to the seller. So the listing agent has to go to the seller and say, here's what I've got. What do you want to do? And it's as usual, it's the seller's decision. And again, make sure you have a paper trail on that. You don't want it done verbally. So I think, does that answer the question? Okay. Can I move along? Any other questions? Okay. The next thing I wanted to cover was the RCJC form, which is the rent cap and just cause eviction form. And the reason, that's a non-COVID form that came out before COVID. That's the form that landlords are supposed to give to tenants to give them notice that certain things are exempt from the statewide rent control. Single family residences, houses built within the last 15 years, condos, et cetera, et cetera. So for whatever reason, they put a deadline on that. And if you're doing a new lease, that form's going to auto-populate and you're automatically going to use it. But for leases that are already in existence, for whatever reason, the deadline is August 1st, which is coming up really soon. So it's saying that by August 1st, all landlords of residential property have to give all tenants of residential property a copy of this form, which has the notice built into it, which gives the landlord certain exclusions for single family, condo, and houses built in the last 15 years. There's no penalty that I can figure out for giving it after August 1st. So, but the exclusions don't kick in for a landlord until you give the form to the tenant. So the sooner the better. So I don't know that I would panic over the August 1st date, but any landlord that has a tenant in a residential property should be giving them that form. Now the question usually comes up, what if the tenant won't sign it? Doesn't really make any difference whether the tenant signs it from the standpoint of giving the notice. The important thing to get the exemptions, if you need them, is giving the notice. So you want proof you gave it. So if you send it by email and you attach it to an email, you've got proof you gave it. If the tenant refuses to sign it, they're not signing it, but you have proof you gave the notice. Now, CAR is not the only form for this. The landlord, the tenant, or the apartment owners association has a form. There's a lot of forms out there that a landlord can use to give that notice. And it's not your job as an agent who did a lease 3 years ago to go back to the landlord and tell them they have to do it. You don't have an agency relationship anymore with that person, but it might be a good marketing idea to go back to a landlord and advise them of that. It's good PR. And my suggestion, here's what I suggest if you're going to give them the form, because anytime you give somebody something, all of a sudden you're representing them or whatever. So you can give them the form. There's a great Q&A from CAR on rent cap and eviction control. I think that it would be great for you to forward that to the landlord as well. You're not giving them any legal advice. You're just forwarding I think it's like a 10-page form on rent cap and eviction control. And when you send them the email saying you're providing this as a courtesy, if they have any legal questions about this, they're advised to talk to their own attorney. So you've done 3 things. You've given them the form, you've advised them to talk to their attorney, you've given them a copy of the Q&A, you've done your job, you've helped them with marketing, you've done some marketing, you've kept in touch with your past landlords, and you've done a good thing, I think. So that's what I would suggest on that.
The question that's come in regarding that form is it acceptable to DocuSign that form?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah, I think that form, because that form, a lot of things in landlord tenant, you can't DocuSign, like 3-day notices have to be wet signatures. But this form, I don't see any problem with DocuSigning it, because it's not a court 3-day notice or anything like that, or 5-day notice. It's just like an addendum to. So I think you're fine. You can zip form. I mean, you can electronically sign a lease. So there's no reason you wouldn't be able to electronic. What you can't electronically sign are court notices and notices of 3-day, 30-day notices or whatever.
I specifically had a back and forth with an agent yesterday regarding this form, and I wanted stressed that what she couldn't understand is that, well, the exemption exists. So how is the exemption being removed from the landlord? And I was trying to get over to her, he doesn't have the exemption until the form is given. And,
that's correct.
And that's why it's really important that the landlords produce this form so that they can claim the exemption.
Exactly. So there's one more form that I wanted to mention as far as COVID, and that's the, 2 more forms actually. The RLA-CAA, the Residential Listing Agreement Coronavirus Addendum form. That form, CAR is now saying that's basically mandatory, that you need to use that form every time you take a new residential listing. And that's and the reason that it's mandatory, according to CAR, is that form, which goes along with the new listing, explains the office policy on showings. It has a copy of the PED attached. It has a copy of the BPPP attached. It has all the stuff attached that you need to explain to the seller at the point in time you're taking the listing. So I believe that, I'm not sure if that form auto-populates with a listing. It certainly should, but I'm not positive it does. And if it doesn't, you need to start using that form all the time, and that's the RLA CAA form. There's also a landlord-tenant form that is similar to the CVA that has to do with landlord tenants, the coronavirus addendum. But you have to understand how that form works. The only time you would use the tenant form, the CVA tenant form with a lease, is if you have a tenant who's, and we had one recently, I don't think it was your office, but we had one recently where a tenant signed a lease in March to start in October. They weren't moving in until October because it was like a 6-month short-term lease or something. So that form could have been used at the beginning of the lease to say, if something happens regarding the coronavirus between the time we sign the lease and the time I move in, then I have certain rights to either cancel or whatever. But it would have to be used at the beginning. Once a tenant moves into the property, you don't need a form because the tenant's in the property. Whether the tenant develops COVID or not, they're in the property. So the only time you would use that particular form is when you have a tenant who signs a lease with a landlord ahead of time and isn't planning on moving in for a month or 2 or 3, and you want to give the tenant that protection, or even the landlord a protection, that if there's a COVID issue, that the lease can be terminated. So that would be the only time you would use that particular form. And
say the name of the form again.
I
Jeff?
think it's the CVA-LR. I could be wrong about that.
I think
I get
you're right.
all the acronyms messed up, but I think it's a CVA-LR. So I'm going to move along now to also with regard to I should have mentioned this before, but with regard to the changes and the revised and the new forms that came out in June, if you want a summary, there's a quick summary at car.org that goes through all the new forms, the 2 new forms and the 11 revised forms, and kind of tells you what the revisions were. So if you want that, you can always find that at car.org. The next topic I wanted to cover is the eviction moratorium, because I get a million questions on tenants. And the answer pretty much is always the same. And the answer is pretty much you can't do anything with a tenant right now. It's unfortunate if you're a landlord, but if a tenant doesn't want to move out of the property, you can't force them to move out for any reason, except there's one exception, and that exception is for health and safety reasons. If there's a health and safety reason that you have to evict a tenant, you could actually do an eviction of a tenant, but that's a really narrow exception. So I always say, if you're trying to get a tenant to, if you're trying to evict a tenant, have them set up a methamphetamine lab in their house, and then you can evict them because it's health and safety. But short of that, you're not going to be able to evict a tenant for any reason right now, because the the Judicial Council, which governs the courts in California, has stated there will be no evictions. No courts will do any evictions, whether residential or commercial, until the emergency order is lifted, and then for another 90 days after that. So there's all kinds of questions that go along with that. Can you force a tenant to show a property because the lease has a sentence in there that says that the tenant will cooperate in showings? Can you force them to show it? The answer is no, you can't. Can you force a tenant to move out of a property because the lease runs out, or you're as a buyer and you want to move into the property? No, you can't do anything right now. So you've all heard the expression a carrot and a stick, which you use as carrot and stick. There's really no stick right now. The landlord doesn't have a stick. So if the landlord is going to try to get cooperation of a tenant, the landlord's going to have to use the carrot. And what's the carrot? Well, the carrot would be the landlord may have to make an agreement with the tenant to reduce the rent, do something with the rent that works to the tenant's advantage, that makes the tenant willing to cooperate. Short of the tenant willing to cooperate, you can't do much. Now, there's nothing that prevents you from doing a cash for keys with a tenant that's not under rent control. So if you have a single family residence that's not under rent control, and you can do a cash for keys with a tenant and get them out, that's fine. But it has to be voluntary. If the tenant won't do it, you can't get them out. Now, when you're under rent control, theoretically, you could still do a cash for keys, but you can't make an agreement that would short them on their relocation fees. So if they're entitled to X amount of money in relocation fees, you can't do a cash for keys that's going to be less for that. I mean, you could do it, but you're going to get caught. And if you get caught, you're going to get penalized and you have to pay the amount. So you have to always be aware of rent control in a particular area. And of course, LA City has rent control. And we now have the statewide rent control. So as far as the eviction moratorium, the question is, how long will it last? We have absolutely no idea. I can tell you that with the way things are going in California, I don't see anybody in any big hurry to remove the eviction moratorium because we're kind of heading in the wrong direction right now. But at some point it'll be lifted and then you'll be able to do some types of eviction. One of the questions that comes up is, can a landlord even deliver like a 60-day notice to a tenant in a residential property? And that's kind of a complicated answer. You can do it, but giving them a 60-day notice doesn't do you any good at the end of the road because you can't evict them. And one of the problems with giving any type of a notice like that is under the CARES Act, which is a federal act, the landlord potentially has a forbearance on their loan. If they have a federally insured loan, they can have forbearance on payments. But as soon as a landlord gives a tenant a notice to vacate, that is going to wipe out the potential for a forbearance on the loan. So before a landlord does anything like giving any kind of a notice, they should check with their own legal counsel because they may be impacting their rights. And one of the things I want to emphasize is that you as agents should not be getting in the middle of a landlord-tenant issue. If there's a landlord-tenant issue and the tenant wants legal advice or the landlord wants legal advice, don't start giving advice to them. Just refer them to an attorney that handles landlord-tenant. I'm going to give you the name and the contact information for a landlord eviction service now. I'm sure I've already given it to Rich, but I'll pass it along to all of you now. It is, and if you have a pen, you can write it down. Otherwise, I'll send it to Rich and he can pass it out. It's a company called SII Real Estate Service. That's S as in Sam, S period, I period, I period, Real Estate Services. The contact person there is David Aniel, A-N-I-E-L. And their telephone number, if I got it right, is 310-275-5580. 310-275-5580. Now, David Aniel is not an attorney, but he's very knowledgeable. He may have spoken at your meeting over the years. He goes out and speaks at meetings about landlord evictions. I've been told that they are extremely helpful when you call there to ask a question. Obviously, they make their money by actually doing landlord evictions, but he's very helpful on giving information and they know all the current information. Unfortunately, I don't have a tenant attorney to refer to you because most real estate attorneys like our office, we don't handle landlord-tenant issues. The best I can tell you, if you don't already have a tenant rights attorney, is to contact the Los Angeles County Bar Association, and they have an attorney referral service, and I'm sure they have a category of tenant rights attorneys that your tenant could contact and get referred to a tenant rights attorney. So that's the information on the eviction moratorium. Rich, you look like you have a question.
Well, in regards to the 60-day notice, if the property is being closed, is being sold, there's no harm in a landlord giving notice, a 60-day notice to a tenant if the buyer wants it delivered vacant, correct?
There's no real harm. It may or may not do any good. The only harm, like I said, would be the forbearance. But if you're selling the property, I don't think at that point you're very concerned about a forbearance on the loan. You've already now. I mean, if I'm just kind of thinking out loud, if you're already behind in your loan payments, they're going to get paid off at the close of escrow anyway, right? Because you can't close the escrow without paying them off. So you probably don't have an issue in that particular scenario.
The only issue is if the tenant just doesn't leave, because then
if the tenant doesn't leave, they don't leave. And again, you're dealing in this, you don't have a stick. Your landlord doesn't have a stick. All they got is a carrot. So you have to try to work whatever you can with the tenant. And it's time to play nice with the tenants as much as you can, because if you get combative with a tenant, they all know their rights now, and their rights are they just don't have to do anything. So it's going to be difficult to get them out. The last, and how are we doing on time? I know I only had like a half hour. I got another 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, I think about another 5. Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah. Keep going.
Okay. So the other thing I was going to cover, which is completely confusing, is the new clear cooperation rule and the coming soon status. And I imagine, Rich, you've already covered that, but just to make sure everybody's aware, The current rule is that as soon as you publicly market a property you have listed, you're going to have to put it into the MLS within 1 business day. And public marketing is pretty much everything, although SRAR has an interesting rule that's a little different than VMLS and CRMLS with regard to what public marketing is. And our rule at SRAR is that it's not public marketing for you to contact one-on-one a prior client or customer that you dealt with in the last year. And the way they define that is if you had an agency relationship signed, an agency disclosure form signed with a buyer or a seller, if you had a buyer representation agreement, or the third category, which is the one that's more all-encompassing, is if you had any kind of substantial dealings with a buyer or a seller or a landlord or tenant over the last 12 months. And substantial dealings has to be more than just a drip system where you've been sending them stuff. But if you've been talking with them about various things dealing with real estate, you can actually contact them one-on-one about a listing without violating the public marketing rule. But once you public market, like you go on social media and advertise it, you go on Facebook, you put it out to a third-party aggregator like Zillow, you've got to put it into the MLS. So then we come to the coming soon category, which is kind of confusing, but basically the idea behind coming soon is there's basically 3 categories at SRAR now. You can still do an office exclusive, and the office exclusive means you can't publicly market the property, but you can discuss it within your own brokerage. You can contact, anybody in your office can contact one-on-one prior clients in the last 12 months, but you can't do anything else. You can't go to social media, you can't do whatever. So you can still do an office exclusive, but again, once you public market, it's got to go in the MLS. You can do a coming soon. The only difference for SRAR with a coming soon and an actual active listing is that under coming soon, the listing does not automatically go out to the third-party aggregators like Zillow, Realtor.com, etc. Now, MLS will not send those out. Now, if you take a coming soon, uh-oh, here comes somebody that's getting within 6 feet of Meny. We got to watch this. Let's see if she gets within 6 feet of Meny. Oh, they cut away, so I can't see. Anyway, on the coming soon, at the point in time, MLS will not send it on the coming soon to the third-party aggregator. But you as an agent, if you have a deal with Zillow, you're free to do that. So even if MLS doesn't do it on a coming soon, you can do it. But the moment that you do it, you then have to make it an active listing because you've violated the rules behind coming soon. So everything about coming soon is similar to an active listing, except it doesn't go out to third-party aggregators, and the days don't count. The days on market don't count. So you can do it for 21 days and not have days on market count. You can show it, you can advertise it, you can do whatever you want with it, except send it out to third-party aggregators, and it's considered coming soon. Now, I have to caution you that all the different MLSs are different. For instance, CRMLS does not allow you to do showings. If you list it in CRMLS on a coming soon, it's 21 days, but you cannot show the property for that 21 days. The MLS has a different rule also. On the MLS, you can't do social media during the 21 days. So every MLS has a slightly different rule with regard to coming soon. If you inadvertently or accidentally violate the rule in the next 3 months or so, you're just going to get a warning. You're not going to get slapped with a fine. The fines are really quite high. And if the association determines that you are intentionally violating that rule, you could be subject to a really hefty fine. So you need to be careful about that. But those are the basic rules behind the SRAR clear cooperation policy.
Jeff, one question about that. So you and once again, it's not because it's new to all of us, right? Newer since May 1st, and it's still very confusing to a certain extent. Right. So you mentioned once it's coming soon on the MLS, then you are able to syndicate to third-party vendors like websites, etc. Correct?
No. If it's coming soon,
yeah,
it doesn't go out to third-party syndicators. And you as an agent, you're always free to send it out to a syndicator if you choose to, because you may have your own agreement with Zillow. But once you do that, it's got to change categories to active. You can't have a coming. So the distinction is in coming soon, the MLS, which normally sends it to a third-party aggregator, will not do that. The agent is free to do it, but if they do it, you have to switch the category to active.
Thank you.
Okay. Kind of crazy rules, but they are what they are.
Yeah, and Jeff, a question has come up about can you, in an exclusive listing, can you send it to other KW brokers?
No,
KW location.
No, only within your broker. The rule is pretty clear that it only applies to your brokerage. So if you, Rich, were a broker of record with more than one office, you might be able to get away with it, but I don't think so.
You can't. No, you can't, because
I think
the way it's set up, they're different corporations, different DRE numbers. Yeah.
So what we're looking at is you can only distribute it in your office. So because all the KW offices are different franchises, and for purposes of this rule, they're just considered a different broker, and they are a different brokerage. Okay, that kind of covers what I wanted to cover this morning. We've kind of run our half hour or so, but if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to spend a couple minutes answering any of the questions that anybody may have. Or maybe everybody understands everything completely with regard to real estate and there's no questions you'll ever have again.
You wish.
Yeah.
I wish.
Thank you. Yeah. Richard, any questions that you want to point out and you see?
I think
Meny, I love your black top and your black mask. You're totally color coordinated. You look like a real serious bandito.
Thank you. It's a cool one.
Yeah, very nice.
I did, you know, Jeff mentioned Glide in his presentation, and it is I've said it before. It's a great source to do your disclosures. But I also want to point out, and I think I'm sharing my screen.
Yes.
Yes.
And this just came up. If you look underneath the map, it says use PED in Glide during COVID-19. You can do your PED Vs directly from the MLS, and it will bring you to a page where you can fill it out, and it will automatically send it to the listing agent. It's a great tool, and it's not only ChrisNet that's doing it. CRMLS for our friends down south, they have this also. So please go ahead and use it. Because it is a great resource, and I can't figure out how. Okay, there we go. I couldn't figure out how to stop sharing, but but it is really a great resource. Use Glide. It's a free. There's a free version that most associations is part of their membership package. So go ahead and use it. And as far as disclosures, it's sellers really love it because it's easy to understand, and they won't let them skip something. So everything has to be everything has to be filled out. So
That's great. I totally agree with what Rich said. There's a free version and a paid version. The paid version, I asked a question in the meeting I was in a couple of days ago, what's the difference between the free version and the paid version? And the response I got back was that the paid version includes more forms, I think, but I'm not sure exactly what forms there would be, because the free version includes the TDS, the SPQ, the AVID, and now the PED forms, and clearly those are the main disclosure form. And I assume it also includes the exempt seller disclosure form.
Yeah.
So those are the main disclosure forms. I think there's some more bells and whistles with the paid version, and the paid version isn't very expensive. So it may be that you want to. I think it might. I might be wrong about this. I may be thinking something else, but I think it may have been $300 for the year or something.
It is it's like, if you want to do it monthly, it's $35 per month for the paid version, or $300 for the whole year.
So my suggestion is just to use the free version, check it out, and if you like it, then kind of compare it to the paid version and see if it makes sense to use that. I have to ask Anthony Spile, because I see, is Anthony Spile, his last name is the same as Steve Spile. Are you related to Steve Spile?
Well, I pretend to be Anthony Spile because I run the meeting, but yeah.
Oh, is that so? Is that so?
Anthony.
It's AJ. It's AJ, Jeff.
It's Steve's boss.
Oh, you stole his name. Oh boy. Somehow I see a copyright trademark lawsuit coming from Steve Spile.
Yeah, exactly.
Many, if I were you, I'd spend the rest of the day protecting my assets from Steve Spile.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll call you for sure, Jeff. Jeff, can't thank you enough for that valuable information, and once again, tons of questions. So I think we addressed most of them. I did share right now 2 links. One is a glide in general. The other one is directly to what the realtors, the sign up free version is. So you guys can just go online and check it out.
By the way, also there are a bunch of, if you go to Glide, I'm sure there's a free demo on how to use it. So feel free to go to the website for the Glide real estate platform, and you can see a free version of how it works.
Yeah, perfect. Well,
Okay.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, Meny. Okay, Rich, thanks much. And we'll be back again with you to do another one in the not too distant future.
Yep. Thank you.
Everybody stay safe.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, good content, and let's move on.
What's going on? Where am I?
Hey, Forky.
How high is that? Who's that? Why do you?
How long have you been a horse?
Why are you talking to me?
Forky asks a question. I don't know.
Well,
Meny, did you know that Forky Asks a Question just got nominated for an outstanding mini web series? Did you know that?
I thought you were gonna say it was nominated for the Realtor of the Year, but that's okay. Yeah, well, that's the running joke theme, just to have fun. But Richard, anything else you want to add on top of what Jeff just shared with us?
I think Jeff hit about 80% of my questions the last 2 weeks. So
Yeah.
hopefully everybody.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything to add. I mean, it was very, very thorough. So, Richard?
I think we're good until Friday's call.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and whoever is on the meeting, we have over 100 people. Make sure to check your emails. We are periodically sending emails. We do track open rate, etc. And not all of you opening the emails. So if you don't receive at least, every morning at 7 a.m. my emails with the daily classes, it means that you don't get any other emails from Richard, team leaders, etc. So go to your spam, or if you have a Gmail or KW email, which is a Gmail based, go to your promotion folder. Make sure that you get all of that from us, because we shared the past 4 months, specifically a lot of information with you guys that is very, very helpful. We try not to waste your time with spam emails, etc. So thanks guys for that. And Stephanie, Halley, let's just share a couple of things on our end. The first thing is last Saturday, same thing. Go back to the same folder, other folders if you didn't see this email coming from KW Ford Living Group, or it just says maybe the Ford Living Group, etc. Search it for the Atias report. The Atias report is a really, really cool feature, and I did post that as well on some of the social media, not on all of them. I didn't put on the KW shares the general one, because not all the offices got it yet. The only offices so far that we subscribed and enrolled is the Calabasas, West Side, Coastal, and Beach Cities and Larchmont offices. So all of those offices right now are getting this report, and this is a sample screenshot of what it is. And on the email itself, you can see some of the reports that are assigned by default to you, just like did a couple of zip codes, etc. Some of them apply to you, some of them are not. And once you're inside, you can, here on the search bar, you can easily type in any zip code in any city in the United States. So we purchased the entire zip codes of LA County as a report that you can subscribe for automatically, right? But once again, you can search and share anything, any zip or city in the United States. So check it out. And you can, once again, subscribe over here and keep getting that and adjust it accordingly. And if for some reason you didn't get it, send me or to your TL, they can forward it to me an email or a text, and I'll check. Maybe we have a separate email, different email that for you. So maybe that's why you didn't get it. But once again, super powerful. It has tons of stats and information. A house, single family, condos, and whatever. Buyers market, sellers market. Just once again, a lot of great insight. Halley, Stephanie, any questions that you see? Make sure just to forward it to me unless it's a relevant question. And once again,
Yeah, not really.
yeah, if it's regarding, if you didn't get it, send me an email or a text. Don't drop a message over here because I'm not going to see it. Email or text. Thank you. So that's that. And do we have Kim? Are you on the line? Kim, in the call?
I'm here.
Hey, Kim.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to take a minute to tell you about a new feature in Command that is set up specifically for teams or anyone who is interested in creating a team. So in the past, when a team leader or rainmaker wanted to add people to their team, this process was done solely through the MCA at your office. But now there's a new tool within Command that allows the rainmaker or rainmakers, if there's two, to request this change themselves. And this is going to expedite the process. It'll also make it easier for your MCAs. The one thing you do need to know is that in order to start this process, your MCA will have to designate you as the rainmaker. So once that's done, then you can go in and manage and modify the team yourself. So for example, if you wanted to add a listing agent, that's something that you could go in and modify. So the process is very simple. You'll go into your settings in Command and go to the general settings. And under the team management section, you'll see where you can add a name. And if you can see this slide here, you'll see that you just search for the agent's name. And actually, it doesn't have to be an agent. You might be adding an administrative assistant. You would search for the name, indicate what role you want them to be. So do you want them to be the administrative assistant or a listing agent or whatever it is you choose? Put in some contact info and you're done. Then your MCA will be notified about this request and they can make the final adjustment, but the whole process should take about 24 hours, so it's fairly quick. Of course, it applies to adding agents within your market center. So should you want to add someone to your team that's not in your office, that would fall under our expansion team process. That's a little different to navigate, and you'd want to talk to your MCA about that. But if you're adding someone for the first time or someone existing in your office, this is the way to do it. And it's a quick tool. KW has always been really supportive of agents creating teams, and this should simplify the process. So it's up and functioning right now. If you have any questions, reach out to us or talk to your MCA.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, and this is, once again, super powerful feature that they had it before, but it was a bit more complicated to enable that and go through the process. So now it's just a click of a button. Once you're assigned as a rainmaker or team lead, you are able to do that. So, if you're working with someone and you want to share the database, maybe even, you have a business partner, etc., right? Someone is the lead or whatever it is, you want to work out of like one platform, etc. That's the big, huge advantage. So definitely take advantage of that. Kim, do you want to give just 30 seconds about the competition we have in the offices right now regarding the Command?
I'm sorry, you said the competition? Oh, the competition, yes.
Contest.
Yes, okay. So we just announced the other day that we're having a Command Your Database challenge. I think each office might be tweaking that a little bit differently in terms of the prize. For Calabasas and West Side, what we'll be looking at is the amount of contacts that you have in your Command database right now. And through August 1st, all the way through August 31st, anytime that you add 50 contacts at least, and also assign each of those 50 contacts to a smart plan, and that can be any smart plan you choose, you will be entered into a contest, the contest to win $250 worth of services from our Forward Living Media Group.
Yeah,
So
photography.
we'll begin on August 1st. And the best part about this is we have Scott Leroy, access to Scott Leroy services. So you can leverage that, send Scott your list of contacts, whether it be in Excel or some other database platform. And that group can upload your contacts to command. They can assign whatever smart plan you want, and you're good to go.
Awesome, thank you, Kim. And then you're gonna see a promotion from us through via email, etc. So look for that. Thanks, Kim. Good job. Later today, at 1 o'clock, we have a session online, great session about financials, the KW platform, 4 p.m. Richard broker update and session. We have great session throughout the rest of the week, so stay tuned and participate. And Stephanie?
All right, so we have Bold starting on August 4th. And if any of you didn't hit it in May, make sure that you do it. It's such a great platform. It's every Tuesday and Thursday from 11 to 1 for the month of August. And then there's opportunities for coaching corners, also a couple days out of the week, but it's just relevant information, everything that you need to know from A to Z. And it's $99 investment. That is it, $99. Usually it's about an $800 investment when we were doing it in person, but really it's something that will kickstart your activities and really get you well-rounded and in the 2020 strong.
Awesome, thank you for that. And Mega Camp, Halley.
Mega Camp, right? We're all excited for Mega Camp. That's coming up. I know we're bummed that we can't do it in person, but we're going to get just as much value virtually. So registration is open and it's happening. But with each of the offices, if we get a group of people together, actually that group number is 15. If we get them all together, you do get a huge reduction in your actual registration price, right? So make sure you check your email. We've been sending out that link, or contact your team leader and say, I want to join and I want to get the discount. We need to register, I believe it's before the 8th on the website of August, but don't miss out. This is going to be a fantastic group of masterminds, of leaders. You know, Gary's going to teach his sessions. It's an absolute great treasure to be able to bring this to our whole offices. Also, on a side note, I know that they announced that really fun contest in Calabasas and Westside. Don't worry, Coastal, you will not get left out. We have our own contest, and we're going to let you guys know that via Facebook and through our phone calls this week.
Yeah, thank you. The same concept, and offices locally will choose if to add second place, third place, whatever it is. But just to add value, and at the end of the day, it's for us just to encourage you to use the platforms that will make you successful and to practice, because database is your business at the end of the day. So thank you for that, ladies. And then one more thing, I just added that slides. Sorry for the resolution. We are going to launch in August, which the first session is going to be next week. Win with sellers. It's a high-level skill practice of how to work with listings and how to work sellers, all the science and the practice behind it. I'm super excited about that because it's usually a session with the cost of 2 days, full days. That either we fly out to Austin or we bring over here people to teach that. But what we did, like we're doing the same thing with the Ignite Marathon, we just reach out to a lot of those top selling agents. Mostly listing agents out there, and it's going to be about I want to say almost a dozen agents from various market centers between Calabasas, West Side, Long Beach, and Newport that will participate. And of course, us leaders participate in those sessions. We're going to have about 2 to 4, even 5 agents per session. The session is going to be on Wednesdays, every Wednesday in August between 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. each Wednesday, launching next week. We're going to send you via email and text a Eventbrite link to RSVP, so we can send you all the materials. It's going to be just via PDF, so you won't have to print anything or purchase anything. We got you covered, guys. And it's going to be a powerful session. So that's coming next. And this coming Saturday, we have our family hike, Franklin Canyon. It's in Beverly Hills. Really nice hike. We practice social distancing with masks, etc. And some people stay later on and just go down the street to have breakfast somewhere locally. So you're welcome to join us. So this coming Saturday, and look it up on the KW Shares group. We have an event over there, so you can see the address, etc. So this is this coming Saturday. With that, the last thing, perfect. Starting August, we're gonna go back to the 2 meeting a month platform. 2 meetings a month platform. So the next one is August 12th, same time, same day, August 12th. We're not gonna separate it between the offices. We're gonna be like 1 meeting, but only twice a month. We're gonna have a producers panel. We already have most of them confirmed with Paul Morris and myself. We're gonna lead this producers panel, 30 minutes or so of brainstorming and discussion about what those guys are doing, etc. with Paul. And then that's August 12th. In August 26th, 2 weeks later, we're gonna talk about markets, updates, statistics, etc. with our affiliates. So stay tuned, and that's all we have, guys. So thanks for participating, and stay safe, stay healthy, be well, behave. And if you have any questions, Richard, that's a new liner right there, and your team leader. So thanks, guys. Be well, stay safe. Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Hey, what's up? Good, man. How are you? Yeah. We're start the recording. Bye, everybody. Good to see you. Kim, good job.